Hello, welcome. I am Dr. Laura Dean Kelly from Tulane University, and we are here today working on a series that Tulane is doing on the disaster, Hurricane Ida, the recovery and response. And our panel today is entitled Climate Change, Disaster, and Indigenous Resistance. And we have members from 2 tribes here on the bayou, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, please.
I'm Chief Sherelle Parfait Dardar of the Grand Cayuga-Dulac Band of Biloxi, Chitimacha, Choctaw, and we are located in, of course, the communities of Grand Cayuga-Dulac, Chauvin, a small section of Berg, and the eastern section of the city of Houma.
Okay.
I'm Second Chairman Donald Dardar, Pointe Chien Indian tribe, and we're Pointe Chien, part of Oregon Road towards Berg and area there, biggest community anyway.
Hi, I'm Patty Ferguson Bonney. I'm a member of the Pointe Chien Indian tribe, and I'm also an attorney for the Pointe Chien Indian tribe.
Yeah. Let's start with you, Chief Sherelle. Can you tell our audience a bit about your tribe?
Of course, we are Biloxi, Chitimacha, and Choctaw descent. And we've been in our tribal area since time immemorial. You know, our people are, they were hunters and trappers and fishers, you know, shrimping, crabbing, things of that nature. Of course, we had caretakers, traditional dressmakers. I myself am a traditional dressmaker. Yeah, I learned from both of my grandmothers. It's a beautiful community and very family oriented, and we love it. There's no other place like it, and I've been to quite a few places, and I've always had to come back home. You know, and we work very hard every day to protect and preserve what's left of our homelands because we've lost so much, you know, over the years. You know, and that's pretty much what our goals are these days.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about what your people have done here recently and in the past, and how that's changed over time?
Oh, we've always been a land and water people.
Right.
You know, that's historical, right? And of course, we've maintained that as much as we possibly could. With all the effects of the climate crisis, a lot of those traditions are changing. You know, we can no longer crab or shrimp the way we used to. You know, especially trying to depend on it for an income has become extremely strained. You know, now most of what's done is for subsistence, but even that's a challenge today, especially with all of the changes that are happening to the lands and the waters. You know, but for the most part, we've maintained our identity, and we're still exactly who we are, even amidst all of the changes and challenges. We've always been an adapting people and a very resilient people, and that's not something that's going to leave us.
Okay, excellent. Donald, how has the landscape changed during your lifetime down here on Pointe Chien?
Well, the water you mentioned earlier behind this building, they didn't have no water there when I was growing up. That's 65 years ago, only 66 in November, and I always did shrimp, crab, oysters, fish, and trap. That's all I ever done. And now, where we used to trap for furs before, for animals, now we fishing crabs and fishing, and so that's a big. I just watched the place disappear, and it's heartbreaking to see how much we lost. And it's just but we adapted to it. Wherever changes come, we adapted to the changes, you know. So it's but it's totally different from when I was a young man and young boy, and now it's not getting better. It's still getting worse, and this is the worst hurricane we ever had, and the most damage we ever saw, and so widespread. You know, I know our community is real bad off because when you lose this many homes in our little communities, it was heartbreaking for me.
Yeah. Patty, can you talk a little bit about the reasons why the land is disappearing? Why there was land right here and now it's water? I mean, it's just open water and almost we're surrounded by water, but at least have some levee protection where Ile de Jean Charles doesn't have levee protection. But what has caused this? A lot of people think it's, you mentioned coastal erosion, but they don't understand the reasons for it.
Well, there are multiple factors, and I think it's important to note that they're man-made factors. They're decisions that have been made without having the people who are impacted being part of the decision-making process. And the primary decisions that were made was, one, to levee the Mississippi River, which prevented the topsoil flow and the redevelopment of the land every year, and the fresh water that would come in and replenish and renew the earth and the bayou, which is, you know, fantastic. I don't know if Donald mentioned this, but our people used to live further down the bayou, 6 to 12 miles further down the bayou. We've already had villages that have had to relocate. Right. So we've already had people who relocated because of the impacts of to our land from not only coastal erosion, but land loss and saltwater intrusion, which that's been primarily caused by oil and gas exploration, where they've come in the 30s, oil and gas was found in Terrebonne Parish, and they came in and they started developing and cutting up the land, and those land cuts have created a huge detriment to our people and our way of life. And they continue to have negative impacts. And a lot of the coastal planning does not include our tribal people. And so, as you mentioned, that there's some levees here that protect our current community where people live, but it's not protecting our historic villages, our sacred sites, our cemeteries, our natural waterways that weren't necessarily salt water. You know, so that's very negative for us. And of course, our tribal community isn't federally recognized, and we haven't been federally recognized. And there was no school or education provided to our communities, and other people took advantage of that. And they continue to take advantage of that. So people in our community weren't allowed to attend high school until the late 1960s. There were very limited opportunities for education, and Donald can talk about his experience, but all of those are compounded to negatively impact the community because people have taken advantage of that lack of education and that lack of federal recognition to basically destroy the land and the resources. And so then that impacts our way of life.
Right. And storms have happened. Coastal erosion, unfortunately, is not a new situation for the last few years. How is this storm different? And I'll ask Donald and Chief Sherrill that question. How is this storm different?
Just from my own experience, I mean, I'm only 41, but I can remember, you know, Hurricane Juan when I was a child, you know, getting into the pirogue with my uncles and then riding it out on Mr. Willis's shrimp boat.
So you rode it out on a boat?
A shrimp boat. That's
crazy. That's
correct. And we were safe.
Yeah.
Of course, you know, hearing about Juan from my elders, you know, they all said it was a rainmaker. Yeah. So there was flooding. Of course, we didn't have, you know, the Morganza levee system back then or anything. So, of course, you know, floodwaters came in. This storm, I could definitely say, is the most intense storm that I've ever witnessed because of the winds. You know, we were very fortunate that where I'm at, we did not flood, but the amount of devastation is something that I've never seen before in my lifetime. Yeah. And I pray that we never have to see that again. Unfortunately, that's our reality is that unless something is done to address the climate crisis and doing what we're, you know, the scientists and our elders with traditional ecological knowledge, you know, have been saying needs to be done, I'm afraid we're going to see more of these. Right. You know, and if you look in other places, we live with nature, right? She's all around us. You know, so we're going to be seeing a lot more impacts like these.
What about in your lifetime, Donald? Is this the worst storm, or how is it different from previous storms?
That's the worst I've ever seen too. And like for Hurricane Juan, we didn't even have no drain levee back here. So when the water would come in, it'd come in quick, and we'd always get it from the south. And whenever it gets from south, across the road over here, fills up the bayou and crosses over. And that was Hurricane Juan. But we had a lot of storms since then, and every one of them seemed like it was worse. But this is really the worst we ever had it. But I've seen islands totally wash away further offshore. But I think with a storm of this much pressure and power that it had, I think we still got devastated over here. It was just something that's never happened before, you know.
So people always ask, like, oh, was this worse than Katrina or Rita in this case? And your answer would be?
It was worse than Katrina for us in this area. We lost a few roofs on homes for Katrina, but never this many homes being totally destroyed and this much damage. And like us, with Katrina was a different direction. I mean, any storm you're going to get, if this storm would have passed a little bit more to the west of us, we'd have had water and wind. I don't think we'd have nothing left at all over here, because they predicted 12 to 15 feet of storm surge, and all they have in the back of his, I think they said it's like 12 feet, so they would have jumped right over that and wiped everything out. The plan is to go 20 feet with it, but 18 feet, so that might have been high enough. But
well, and the houses they seem to get higher with each storm and higher, but that's for water. When you go up higher, of course, it affects, it makes you more vulnerable to wind.
Yeah, you protect from the flood, but then you're more vulnerable to the wind.
So let me ask this question to y'all, because some people's reaction is, well, move away, don't stay here, move away. And what would your response to this be?
I got asked that quite a few times, but people will come and bring supplies. And I say, this is home, you know.
I think that what people may not recognize is that we're totally connected to the land, the landscape, not in that, you know, people like Donald and other people have a responsibility and take that responsibility on to be caretakers of the land and try to teach that to the younger generation. Whatever amount of land is left, it's still all part of us and our history and our ancestors who are still buried in these lands. And I don't think that people take that responsibility lightly, because it's always been about the place, connected to the place with the people, that you have that connection. I also, you know, I guess with regards to your question, there's different ways you can look at it. Is the way that this storm hit, you know, right in Pointe. Right. So why are we now the buffer, right? And then if we're not the buffer, who's next and going to be the buffer? And I think it goes back to your statement earlier. I'll say this, I think you were trying to say this, that we're all connected. Right. And we should care about those whoever that is, the government or industry, have put in harm's way. And if there are ways to rectify that, we should work on that. Because for our community, for Chief Jarrell's community, for Mr. Albert's community, it's not just about where people live. Mm-hmm. It's about maintaining your existence as a tribal people, maintaining your cultural heritage and your ways of life. And then in addition to that, we know that homes can be built resiliently. We have homes that we built after Katrina in each of our communities, and they withstood the storm. But there hasn't been the right amount of investment in our communities by those who've caused the harm to assist people in fortifying their homes and strengthening them. There hasn't been investment from the government. There hasn't been investment from private industry. And I just want to mention this because when my mom grew up, they lived in a palmetto house on the ground because that's all they needed to live in to survive. And so what changed and who made those decisions that caused those changes? And there needs to be some accountability. So when people say you should just leave, it's about, one, we have no accountability. And we do have people who have left because they can't rebuild or they're going to find a job somewhere else. But we have a strong community here, and we need to support them because to me, by not supporting our community, you are saying it's okay if we allow these communities to disappear and we're not supporting their self-determination or resiliency and providing any accountability as to what happened. So there needs to be accountability.
Your kinship ties are very strong. So there's a tie to the land that is witnessed through the people and through the families and then through the traditions and the sacred spots. And that community has a real, true, deep meaning to it that I think, again, the average American, we come in and out of communities, right? We enter the Tulane community, then we leave it, we move here, we have that community. But that's different from a tribe. And how would you want to describe that sense to the people watching this, what it means to be a tribe?
Well, I guess I could kind of give them an example that's really traditional amongst even our bayou communities. So in a lot of situations, you'll have family land or what we call traditional land. And you'll see all of our family live amongst each other, right? Like my dad and mom, when they got land, it was an arpent. And my dad's dream was that all of his children were going to be on that land with him. And it's not that we don't venture out of our communities. It's just that we come back because it's our identity. It's who we are. It's where we want to raise our children with the values that we have. Because you can't instill in them their identity and their traditions and their values if you live an entire state away, right? And just for an example, I grew up in Grand Caillou-du-Lac, along Shrimpers Row, and my husband is from Chief Albert's tribe, Ile de Jean Charles. So of course I stay within my tribal territory. So we moved in Chauvin, which is in my tribal territory, but it's in the middle of, both communities technically. And it literally took me a long time to adjust just to being on a different bayou.
Right. Because
Shrimpers Row and Grand Caillou-du-Lac is all I knew. Yeah. And that was my life. That was my identity. And, it's, I guess for others that aren't brought up the way that we're brought up, it can be difficult to understand. But anyone who's ever come into our communities and spent time with us, they want to come back because the connection is so deep. And it's not just to the people, it's to every single element of that community that we're connected. And you won't experience that anywhere else.
So moving away is not...
It's not an option.
Option.
I would never do that. And since this storm, my husband is a very reasonable man, and as a provider for his family, of course the thought entered his mind, of, okay, maybe we should move further inland. And my 12-year-old daughter said, that's okay, I'm going to move back. So no, it's not an option to leave. It's our home. It's literally who we are. And you don't abandon your homeland.
No.
You know, we are stewards of the land and the waters, and that's a responsibility that's been instilled in us since we were brought up. You know, so I'm really proud of who I am and where I'm from and where I'm going to stay.
Right. Patty, could you speak to something that Chief Sherrill just mentioned about property and families and how that may complicate and be, you know, problematic, especially in this time when you're trying to navigate FEMA and assistance and everything else, and how that can create further difficulties?
Before we go there, I just want to ask Donald where he has lived his whole life.
I lived in Pointe, Chien my whole life, and across the bayou from here. On this side of the bayou is Terrebonne, the other side of the bayou is Lafourche. And if you watch the hurricane track it took, right on the line, Lafourche and Terrebonne. And I got a picture of the map of the storm. It passed right over us over here, because you see one of the lakes, like Montague's, west of us right here. And you get you can see Wanda Lake real clear on the map, that in the eye of the storm. And but I just and what's so unique about the bayou here, been living here, been fisherman, crabber, trapper, and whatever I got to do to survive. My dad taught me how to do all that, and his dad before him. And if you ask anybody down the bayou here who down Dardar is, everybody knows. Everybody knows everybody. And across the bayou on the push side, I'm related to everybody from first house to the last house down the bayou. It's all family. So that's why when they ask me why stay, because it's home, and that's the only answer I got for them, you know. And
you've never wanted to go anywhere else?
No. Like you wait for this storm, I knew I wasn't staying for that. Yeah. I knew it would be bad.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying about, you know, across the bayou, our land it's the tribe that lives across the bayou. And as Native people, we haven't gone through the white man's process necessarily of, oh, let's give this land to X person and, you know, this will be in your name only. I mean, some families have done that, but a lot of the land, especially the Billiot land, has not been probated. Our ancestor Alexander Billiot, he died in 1900. That land hasn't been probated, and everybody considers it Indian land and family property, even for other ancestors. And as Donald said, we're all related, but you have to follow the process within the families as to where people should live and put a house. But that becomes complicated when you have a storm and FEMA denies people FEMA, the rights to funding. So, for example, after Katrina and Rita, there was a road home process, and so that was operated by the state. But because people didn't actually own the property, they were treated as renters. So already FEMA didn't value our homes as much because the property values here aren't as high as somewhere else. But they also were treated as renters, so they didn't receive as much resources to rebuild. And today, now with this storm, it sounds like, FEMA has undergone some changes to recognize family airship, but we have a number of families who've been having problems getting their FEMA claims approved because they live on family property or they live in houses that their families have lived in. And that's just how people operate down here, especially on the Billiot side over here. Nobody has title to the property, and there's never been a succession for that property. So that creates a lot of legal challenges, and people don't have the resources or know how to overcome that, and sometimes the policies don't allow that to be overcome.
But you're a tribe. Surely you're getting lots of assistance from the federal government and state government as, Indigenous people, and don't you have like a special channel that gets money sent to the tribes?
Is it on that tree right there?
Is one of those channels in the bayou that's bringing the water in?
Is that a money tree? I don't think so. Well, we're not federally recognized. So none of the coastal tribes in Louisiana are federally recognized. So that means that they do not have a direct government-to-government relationship with the federal government. So for example, when this storm happened, the next day, I was on the phone with someone from the FEMA feeding team asking for assistance. And their response was, oh, you go through the tribal liaison or you go through the state. Well, we can't go through the tribal liaison because we're not federally recognized. And the state did not make the request for us. Under the emergency operation plan for the state, if there's an emergency, the Governor's Office of Indian Affairs is part of the response, and they're supposed to coordinate with the tribes. And the parishes are supposed to coordinate with the tribes.
But this was ground zero. The storm came right through here. It hit Grand Isle and bounced and came straight here, made second landfall. So
exactly. And if you look at the NOAA maps, the IRMA maps, there aren't any pictures down here. It's like we don't even exist. No one mentioned, did anybody hear on the news, oh, the second landfall of Ida was in Pointe.
No.
But who saw it?
Yeah.
We all saw the line. We all saw it coming, and we all see the results of that. But, you know, the two parishes, we have the bayou, as Donald was saying, it divides us into Terrebonne and Lafourche, are supposed to work directly with the tribes under that emergency operation plan. That did not happen.
So the worst storm in your lifetime, the worst storm that anybody has seen, elders have seen on down, and nothing.
No, no. The tribe. Well, for Pointe, Cheryl can talk about Grand Kaidulak. For Pointe, Donald and other tribal members were clearing debris off the road so people could get back. Now the pumps are run by the parishes here, and they didn't turn them on. So there was water in our community for well over a week after the storm, even though it wasn't a flooding event because there was water. There was no way for the water to get out because the pumps weren't turned on. And we can't turn them on.
So you can clear your own roads, you can try to get the debris so people can come and see what's left of their home, but you can't operate the machinery to get the water out.
I think that's just turning on the pumps.
Yeah, flipping a switch.
What do you think, Donald?
Got the pump across the bayou, you got a automatic switch, so
what happened?
it ran out of fuel.
And what happened on this side?
Probably couldn't keep up. And they don't bring extra pumps, and something they could have done.
We know a storm's coming, but that goes back again to who do we care about? What do we value? Who do we value?
Right.
That's not enough people down here, and we're broken into two political subdivisions, the parishes. I'm just saying it's an ongoing pattern. It's not a new thing.
Of course, Grand Kaidulak is not split between two parishes, but it was the same level of response, even being in Terrebonne Parish. We do not have proper communication or coordination with our Office of Emergency Preparedness, especially for disasters. And that's something that technically is a law, right? And that needs to change. I mean, this is unacceptable, how we're being treated. And if you step outside of the tribal, right, identity just for a second, we are all tax-paying citizens.
All right.
Okay? And our taxpayer dollars contribute to these systems that are supposed to be there during our times of need. And yet, we have extreme amounts of difficulty accessing the resources or even applying to receive from these programs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a lot of difficulty even being able to apply for resources through these programs. For example, I had to navigate the same systems as everyone else, regarding FEMA and SBA, and it was a nightmare. I am quite technically savvy, and I am very capable of uploading documents and all these things that they require. And I had extreme difficulty navigating the system that they've put into place. I could only imagine the amount of frustration felt by our elders or those that are special needs people, right? That were basically required to go through this process without being able to access them properly, and not having anyone coming directly into the community to assist them with it. And on top of that, you have deadlines to apply for these things. So I'm still not finished. And you know.
And when did you get electricity?
I don't have electricity.
Oh, it's just
I do not have electricity.
So it was 8 weeks yesterday, and you still have.
I still do not have electricity. The new pole for Entergy, because my pole has been fixed, is laying in my yard, and this is the 4th time that I've reached out to them, and they put in an emergency order today to have my electricity repaired and ready to go, and they still have not showed up yet. So you can imagine the level of frustration, a mother with 2 young children, you know, having to constantly purchase fuel for a generator that's contributing to the emissions that we're trying to reduce. It's just been a bit much.
I imagine.
Yes.
Patty, you want to?
Yeah. I just want to follow up because I think people need to understand how unnecessarily difficult it was made to even request assistance, because for a month at least there was no, you know, electricity or water in Pointe. There's still no internet. There's still poor phone service. And I was making requests on behalf of all the tribes. Even though I represent Pointe, I was making requests on behalf of...
And tell them where you were doing it from.
I was doing it from Arizona because I had internet, fast internet, and I was sending these requests. And one of the responses I received was, why can't the tribal leaders just make these requests themselves? They have no internet. There's still no internet here in Pointe.
Yeah.
There's still no internet. There's still phone service is spotty.
Right.
And the people I'm associated, you know, sending these emails to, I'm identifying myself as an attorney for Pointe, writing on behalf of the tribes. And the requests that we made were not unreasonable. Send FEMA people to our communities. Help us with mass feeding. Help, you know, different... Housing, different things like that. And, you know, the only response I did receive was that my mass care feeding request went in. But we had already received food assistance outside of that mass care feeding program because that was way late, you know. So, but one of the other things that we were requesting, we were trying to request through Salvation Army for cleaning supplies and things of that nature. And we were told, you know, that request has to go through the state. The state didn't put in the request, so we had to get the Catholic Church to submit the request because they wouldn't respond to our request because we're not a federal tribe. So not having that federal status actually also limited us with nonprofits who come in and provide disaster aid.
Which you wouldn't think of. You would just assume nonprofits would help anyone and everyone, and when you're down here and you see the catastrophic level of destruction, because this is wind destruction, there's some of these houses, there's nothing left but the steps, and that it's obvious how much help is needed, and some of it nonprofits can do, food. Tulane's been sending volunteers each Saturday. Students have been helping with this demolition work, but some of it you can't, like housing. Where's temporary housing?
Or debris pickup.
Or debris pickup.
Which is just like 2 months in.
Yeah.
And it's not even going to be all the debris pickup because you can't tear more things down if you have no place to put the debris.
Right.
Or to clear the roads.
Yeah.
You know, how long did it take for them to clear the roads?
Which just, I guess, leads to my question about obstacles and hurdles, but also support, like medium, short-term, medium-term, long-term support. What would you like to tell the people watching?
And as I've said, and we've all said, we have always been a resilient and adapting people. Okay, we have been working on different projects, different plans, you know, for our communities, right? So that our people are able to live healthy, productive lives that are also beneficial to our environments, right? And would benefit everyone in our communities. We need support with those projects. And we don't just take all of this information, right, that we create and hoard it to ourselves. No, we share this information with other communities that are going to be facing the very same real challenges that we are facing today. And, you know, quite frankly, we're a tribal people. We cannot deny that. We know that. Everyone else has known that for forever. However, we seem to be the ones that get discriminated against because we simply don't have a federal status blessed upon us, right? And this is a system that has been created by others and pushed upon us, right? And at the same time, the process just continually gets more and more difficult. You know, we've been in the process for well over 25 years now, and we should have already had federal acknowledgement, you know, so those are just a couple of the things that I can mention right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just a matter of understanding that we are all connected. And just because we're a tribal people makes no difference. We are still all brothers and sisters. Yeah. And we are responsible to and for each other. Mm-hmm. So it's past that time that we start doing what needs to be done for communities, especially communities like ours, because you're going to hear it time and time again. We're frontline communities. Yes, we are frontline right now.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we're always going to be the frontline community. There are others that are next if we don't start doing what we know needs to be done, right, and getting support to carry those things out.
Yeah. What about coastal erosion? Are there ways to rebuild the marsh, Donald? Are there projects that you've been involved in? You know, is there hope that some of this land can be slowly come back again?
If it's possible to, I know we can't put back everything, but they built land off inside the Grand Isle right there for the birds, for the pelicans to nest on. So, you know, if you could build land that quick for birds, seemed like you could build land
for people?
Yeah, big land for people. And so we know it can be done, but it's just are they going to do it, you know, just, and I don't know.
What about the backfill?
Yeah, we have a canal backfill that we're working on. There's 6 tribes. How many tribes is that?
Yeah, I want to say it's like 5 tribes.
5 tribes, yeah, and we're working on the canal backfill, and that's gonna try and slow down the tidal water anyway, from natural flow, you know, that's currents, and hopefully we could close some of them canals off, that we would have a little bit less current coming in as fast anyway. We did a project with oyster shells with CRCL, and we went check it the Wednesday, I think, after the storm, or somewhere right there, the following Wednesday, and it looked like it had, with all the mud they had with this storm, it kind of built up on top of the bags of shells, the ones that was higher to the top. So it like created a little marsh there, but it destroyed a lot of the other marsh. So it's a little marsh creation there, but a lot of destruction of other places. So
But now that you've seen that project, You think it could be done other places?
I think we could save a little bit just with oyster shells, yeah.
What are the oyster shells doing?
The oyster shell is supposed to create its own reef. Baby oysters are going to grow onto them, and it's just going to keep getting larger and larger and just keep growing. That's the purpose
So
of
it's
it.
a natural barrier that protects those sacred mounds and stops the land from eroding there.
Right. And they had baby oysters on them when we checked them, so it looked like
that's good.
it might work, yeah.
Patty, short, medium, long-term?
So,
Wow.
I mean, I think if I asked Donald, what do people need now?
Homes.
Homes. So right now in the short term, we want to get people into some temporary sheltering at their location so they can rebuild their homes.
Right.
Because people can't rebuild their homes if they're not here.
Right.
And people don't want to be anywhere else. And you can see if like people are bringing sheds down and things like that down to convert into homes because they want to come back. People want to be here. They don't want to live in the city. They want to eat fresh seafood, so that's their life. They want to be around their family. It's a whole kinship mentality of taking care of each other, which you can't do if you're dispersed. You just can't do that. So that's one of the things. Second, we need to take care of our crabbers and our shrimpers because they lost a lot during the storm too, and they provide for everyone. The resources they share with everyone else, all the family, but they also make their living off of that. And so we need to find ways to support them. I haven't heard of any programs. Have you heard of any programs yet for the fishermen, Donald? I'm talking to you because you're the fisherman. No? And then long term, we want to rebuild homes that are resilient and strong, that can withstand the storms because we know that it can be done. And while we're doing that, we also want to create more protection below the cutoff, which is the current village where people live, because that's all sacred land to us that has our ancestors and our fishing areas, and we know that there can be projects that are done. And the problem is, you were talking about levees earlier, like levees can be good and they can be bad. And so now that there's a levee there, that threatens that land even more.
Right.
Because it's totally outside and it will be pummeled. And so we know, because the levee isn't complete, we were hit by Hurricane Barry 2 years ago, the water found its way through that opening and came up. Because there's so much water, it's going to find those openings. And then also, not just about the land, I think we're really concerned about losing our language. I know we're really concerned about losing our language, and so we want to be able to ensure that the younger children can learn the language in schools and that they feel comfortable learning the language, because everything is in English. And we want to be able to maintain our Indian French, and we can only do that through some support through the school system, which basically tried to assimilate everyone and have them not speak the language.
Isn't there laws in Louisiana specific with Codafil that's supposed to be helping protect, promote, and preserve?
Yeah, they're supposed to be, but they don't work in Terrebonne Parish. We have filed 2 petitions with the Terrebonne Parish School Board with a sufficient number of parents requesting French immersion at Pointe Elementary. One in 2018, one in 2020. The school board never acted on those petitions. Actually, they did nothing. And we met with them in 2019, and they told us that we heard you're thinking about closing Pointe Elementary. We think it would be great to convert this to a French immersion school. Donald and Chief Sherrill, they were both at that meeting. And the superintendent said, no way, we're not going to close the school. We would never do that. And then at the end of this past school year, with COVID and everything else that happened, they moved to close the school. So now our kids aren't even going to school in our community, and we're the only bayou that doesn't have a school. Wow. And so we're still going to be working on something to provide Indian French language to our kids. We might be delayed a little bit with the storm, but it's still a priority for the tribe.
Patty, starting with you and going down, can you speak to indigenous resistance? How does resistance look down here? What's the face of resistance here?
I think it exists in a couple ways. One is that we still exist, even though basically, first the schools didn't want our kids to go there, and now they want to close the school, basically saying we're not important. We have to push back and say, no, we are important and we matter, and we still live here because we know that people would love for Pointe to turn into sports fishing. Right? Sports fishing.
So a pleasure ground for
a
others,
pleasure
but
ground
not a
because
home.
because people want to use the resources here. But that's not what we want. Yeah, you can have your sports fishing wherever you go, but this is our home. This is our way of life. This is our community. And we have examples from our community when oil and gas was trying to cut through a cemetery. And I don't know if you were there, Donald. You could probably talk about it. And our tribal members went out with guns and said, no, you're not going to cut through our cemeteries. And they left, but then they filed a lawsuit against us, and now we're suing them. And that's been going on since the mid-'90s. We filed an Aboriginal land title claim. But, the courts stayed that claim until the federal government decides whether we're federally recognized. So we can't give up on that fight, because you shouldn't have to be federally recognized to have your indigenous identity and your self-determination respected. Right. But that's what that's a violation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
I was going to say, doesn't the UN have a statement about that?
Yeah, and Chief Sherrill's tribe, our tribe, Pointe, Ile-de-Jean Charles, Grand Bayou, and a tribe from Alaska filed a complaint with some special rapporteurs at the UN. And we're asking that the U.S. that the special rapporteurs investigate this complaint, and that the U.S. invite the special rapporteurs here so that they can do the investigation, because the country has to invite the special rapporteurs. And because we believe it's long overdue. The longer that we wait, the more harm that occurs.
Yeah, so this resistance has a long history. It's not something coming up recently.
I don't know if this is resistance, but last night I went to the bay and just started, threw a couple of cast nets and ended up catching enough shrimp for me to eat supper. So that's pretty.
There you go. I think existence is resistance.
Just crossing the road from my house, and I had mentioned that already. But whenever you just step out your house, walk to the bay side, get in your boat, and go to work, and that's pretty unique, So I don't think you got too many other places you could do that,
Of course, I did have the wonderful pleasure of growing up hearing stories about my dad and my uncle. And Mr. Donald's wife, Miss Teresa, actually they was very good friends with my dad and my uncle. So she was able to tell me some stories too, and they were very set on resistance. Right? There was no way that you were going to treat them any differently just because. Right. They were Native. And we were not allowed to hide away from our identity in being Native. We were taught to be proud of who we are and stand up for who we are at all times. And I'm very thankful that I was brought up with those teachings, because, Creator made us. Right. And we are beautiful, and we deserve to be loved and respected for who we are, just like everyone else does, and...
Was there prejudice down here?
Oh, absolutely. One of the stories that I had the privilege of hearing about was this this bar called the Bon Temps Roulé. And my dad and my uncle looked completely different. My dad was very dark-skinned, straight black hair. Well, his brother was very light-complected, had green eyes and more curly hair. But they were brothers. Right. Well, my uncle was allowed to pass through the front door, but not my father. Wow. And that was not acceptable. So naturally the fight started, right? Because my uncle was not going to watch his brother have to pass through a back door just because, he wasn't considered basically human enough. So they fought to defend who they are and where they're from, their right to exist. And, that was instilled in us as well. And I'm very grateful for those stories and examples, because although times are different, and yes, things have changed, it's not that different for us, even though there have been some strides to improve in accepting everyone. We still struggle because of our identity as Indigenous peoples and as tribal peoples. And recently I was given, for my 41st birthday, my uncle gave me the name of Traiteur de Terre, and that means healer of the land. Right. And just in earning that name, it meant a lot to me, and it also taught me that I have a responsibility now, and that is to remain where I am, remain who I am, and fight to protect the land that we call home. Right. So we're going to continue to resist the genocide. We're going to continue to resist those who feel that we should not be here. And until those times change completely, we're going to do what we have to do.
So again, I ended on this question. Shout out to the audience for support, whether that be financial, because I know money makes a big difference in these situations, or skill sets, or supplies, or ways they can volunteer, or how they can assist the tribes. Question is kind of several-fold. One, how would they get in touch with you? And two, what's on your wish list? What would you like to tell people?
Yeah, so our website is pactribe.com, and on there you can find a list of things that we need and also ways to donate. And specifically, the things that we need right now are building supplies. We also need people to assist with rebuilding. And if people have any sort of temporary housing shelters that they would like to donate, we could accommodate that, because we have at least 90 families who are without homes. In Lower Pointe, only 10% of the homes are habitable. So when people would ordinarily house their relatives, that's harder to do because so many people don't have their homes. So if you want to help, if you have technical skills with contracting or labor that you want to volunteer, if you're an electrician and you can help people with rewiring, things of that nature, that would be helpful. If you want to donate building supplies, we have lists that specific families need, so you could focus on one family and donate the supplies that they need.
Or gift cards to
or
Lowe's,
even gift cards
Home
to
Depot.
Lowe's or Home Depot. The other thing that I'll mention, because people may not realize this, the most that you can get from FEMA is $36,000. Most of our homes are not insured. And I just want to give you an example. Our tribal building is right here. It's how many feet in the air, Donald? I don't know. Taller than most. So it's quite
16, 18 feet.
Yeah, it's quite high in the air. And a few years ago, we were going to get wind insurance, and the wind insurance was going to cost us $12,000. Wow. So we didn't get wind insurance. And that's the same. This is a 1,200 square foot building. Yeah. So the families don't have wind insurance. Right. And some people are being denied FEMA because they don't have flood insurance, but their houses are 15 feet in the air, so why do they need flood insurance? So there's a huge need for resources, for rebuilding resilient homes, and for having strong roofs to protect that home. Because if you don't have a strong roof, then you're going to lose everything in your home, and maybe the whole home. So those are the things that we need. If there's people who are willing to build, people willing to design homes of different sizes, people willing to donate supplies and labor. And, right now we have great volunteers on Saturdays through Tulane, which we really appreciate because we couldn't move all this debris without volunteers. So all this that has been done so far has been volunteer-based. And that's just a blessing to everyone in the community. It gives them a little ray of hope, actually a lot of hope, when you see people come in, and none of it's government. It's all people from the goodness of their hearts.
Well,
I want to make sure we get Sherelle's
let me just say one
website.
thing,
Yeah.
So everything that you just said now, I'm thinking at Tulane, we have a School of Architecture.
Yeah.
And this seems to be a perfect opportunity to looking about building, as you said, affordably, sustainably, wind event, because this is not just a problem here down the bayous. You know, this is going to be problems all along the coast, and then you look at tornado alleys, you look at extreme weather that is a result of climate change, and that there's a real opportunity to look here, look at the guts of these houses that have been ripped apart and say, okay, so what happened here, and why is this house standing and these next 10 not? And then look at rebuilding. It seems to me that that would be tailor-made for the architecture school and for the students going there and the professors to think about it. Think about building and something that could be replicated in other areas. So
yeah, definitely having some plans and prototypes, looking at the buildings that did survive.
Yeah.
Why did these buildings make it through? Why did Donald's house make it through, but someone next to him, you know, his neighbor didn't?
Right.
You know, or his mom's house, part of it, you know, came apart. So what is the difference in the way those houses were built or the way they were reinforced? What can be done so that people don't just, they're not going to get very much, so they're going to build something and it's not going to be sustainable.
Right, right.
We don't want that. That, you know, all of these storms create, you know, a lot of, it's not just, you know, the building, it impacts your whole self.
Yeah.
And
which then reverberates through the tribe.
Yes.
So for Pointe, the website is
pactribe.com.
pactribe.com.
And we have a GoFundMe on there. We have a PayPal on there. We have list of supplies that we need.
And it's 100% tax deductible.
100% tax deductible. And if you want to donate your services, you can contact us and we can help coordinate that. Were you going to say something, Donald?
I was just going to say, your building, we got a round building for our tribal building, and then we got a little square house on the right side of it, and both of them withheld the storm. You know, the tribal building or the round building, it blew out the back door, but besides that, though, you know, we had a back porch on it, but it took that and the back door. And the little building, the water came in through the doors and the windows because of the pressure. Besides that, you got no damage to the square building.
So let's take a look at that. All right, Chief Sherelle, how can they get in touch with you, and what's your wish list for help and supplies?
Well, of course, we do have a tribal website, and again, no internet and still no electricity, so we need some serious updating on the site. But it's gcdbcc.org /support. Okay. And that goes directly to the tribe's PayPal, which is 100% tax deductible. Also, you know, if you want to follow us on social media, we have a Facebook pages as well under Grand Kaya Dulac Band of Biloxi Chitimacha Choctaw. And everything that Patty just said that their community needs is the same thing each of our communities are in need of. And, you know, of course, financial support is definitely a blessing because that allows us to do the work that we need to do. You know, getting supplies and things, but of course we need supplies. And we have been very blessed with volunteers, you know, even from Loyola University coming in to assist with FEMA appeals and things like that. So, you know, if there are those out there that have talents and skills and they want to come and assist us in the communities while we're rebuilding, then please contact us. My information is also on the website.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and I would love to be able to check back in the spring and see how the efforts are going, and to let the Tulane community and everybody else who's watching this find out where you are in the recovery and rebuilding process at that point. In the meantime, wishing you all the very, very best, and here's hoping good things will come out of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.